We go to the next chapter. As I mentioned, always start your thinking with energy efficiency, if it would be up to me at least, and the European Commission. So what are the plans of the European Commission to step up our ambition with regard to energy efficiency? That's the next chapter. And to understand what the step up is, I'll first describe where we're coming from right now. Let me take a sip of water first. Okay, so to determine an energy efficiency target, we first need, again, a baseline, a reference point. And in current regulation, the reference point is taken from a scenario made in 2007. In 2007, so 14 years ago, they predicted the energy use, the expected energy use in 2030. So that's an old forecast, but at that point, they forecasted the expected energy use of Europe in 2030. And from that scenario, the target was adopted in 2018, so only 3 years ago, to achieve 32.5% energy efficiency gains. So 32.5% of that forecasted energy should not be used. We'll aim for not using almost a third of that projected energy use. This is currently the binding target in Europe. So how are we doing relative to this target? Based on current policy and based on final energy consumption, there is also a different definition, but you get more or less the same figures. Based on final energy consumption, we are currently going for or expected to achieve 29.4% energy efficiency gains, or almost 30% of the forecasted energy is not used. That means there is actually still a 3.1% gap between where we expect to end up and where we should end up. And that's the current target. Now, the European Commission says this is not enough. We have to step up our ambition that 32.5% is not enough. But first of all, they set a new baseline. Because, again, this scenario from 2007 is old. We have probably an updated idea of where our energy use is going to end up in 2030. So let's start with a new baseline. And the baseline right now is actually exactly where we expect to end up. So the 29.4% gains that are expected to be made. On top of that, if you look at the energy that is still used in that scenario, we want to reduce 9% of that energy use. So 9% more should be gained in terms of energy efficiency gains. Of course, you can relate that 9% back to the original target. You change the baseline. It's equivalent to a 36% reduction compared to the original baseline from 2007. So this is all nice and easy, but probably still quite abstract, just throwing around these percentages. What is actually the objective at hand right now? Well, the objective is now to cover this energy efficiency gap of 77 million tons of oil equivalent. That's already a little bit more concrete. It's an absolute figure, 77 million tons of oil equivalent. But yeah, imagine 77 million tons of oil and the energy contained in that. How much is it? A few people know exactly how much we're talking about. So a small comparison, the Netherlands, well, we're a small country in the Netherlands, but relatively consume a lot of energy. The energy consumption of the Netherlands was around 60 million tons of oil equivalent over the past decades. So the proposal is now to get extra efficiency improvements of 77 million tons of oil equivalent. So the energy efficiency gains that should be attained before 2030, in 30 years from now, surpass the complete energy consumption of the Netherlands. That's just to give you a bit of an idea how much 77 is. So how fast do we have to become more efficient? The European Commission, the current legislation actually states that energy efficiency has to improve by 1.5% per year, per annum, between 2014 and 2020. And after that, the improvement should be minus 0.8% per annum. So basically, the tempo is, there's slowing down. Current legislation allows us to slow down between now and 2030. What the European Commission is proposing is to, from 2023 onwards, to go back to that original pace of 1.5% energy efficiency gains per annum. Again, all nice and easy, but how and who are going to do that? Well, first of all, public organizations are going to be the front runners. They have to achieve 1.7% per annum improvement. So per year, use 1.7% less energy. And this is public organizations in the broadest sense. So not just the top of the government, but any public organization, any organization that is public should be part of this. Oh, I go a bit too quickly. Another regulatory requirement for public organizations is to renovate 3% of their floor space to nearly zero energy buildings per annum. Well, if you renovate 3% of your floor space annually to nearly zero emission buildings, and you do that for 30 years, you have renovated 90% of all floor space to nearly zero energy buildings. So that's obviously would be a great step. And there was already a requirement there to renovate floor space to a high energy efficiency level, but that level has now become nearly zero energy buildings. So a more ambitious target to achieve. And public organizations should go for sustainable procurement without excuses. So there, in current legislation, there are all sorts of conditions. So like there should be enough competition in the market. It shouldn't be too expensive. There should, now actually there's a big cross through all of those conditions. And there are less excuses, and actually that's also a good thing because public organizations actually can make a big difference. Then it can actually make a market by, even if there is only one supplier of a sustainable type of input. As public organizations move towards those sustainable options, they can create a market, can create more supply. So that will be a great step. Then energy poverty. Energy poverty is also a big theme, and it comes back in several directives and regulations. About 7% of European households lives under energy poverty, which actually means that you don't have the means to pay for your electricity bills or are struggling to do so. And obviously, if energy becomes more expensive or you're obligated to renovate, that could both increase your energy bills and could face you with higher investment plans. And you simply need a lot more money, which you don't have. So it could aggravate the energy poverty problem that currently exists. And the current proposal says that improvements in energy efficiency should be proportional. So you can't just renovate the houses of rich people, right? If 7%, for example, lives under energy poverty in your country, then actually 7% of the energy efficiency gains should be found under those households. So in that sense, it should be proportional. But that also means that these households may face increase in costs. And on that, the Energy Efficiency Directive says that countries should introduce a national energy efficiency fund or other instruments to fully compensate those households for any increase in costs. So national energy efficiency fund is one suggestion, but it could also be done in other ways. By the way, I come back to this on how they intend to do that. Also in the chapter on the ETS that is introduced to the built environment, transport, and the social climate fund that is introduced. That is a big chunk of how they want to enforce this. So again, here you see how different proposals and directives are interlinked. Companies, finally, if companies use more than 100 terajoule of energy, an energy management system is compulsory. An energy management system basically gives you a sort of real-time insight in your energy use, your savings potential, and obviously it all starts with insight and data. And an energy management system would become compulsory for these organizations, the really big energy users. Any company above 10 terajoule would be obligated to do an energy audit every 4 years. You can also commit to a stringent energy performance contract. And if you do that, then you don't necessarily need an EMS or an energy audit, but through an energy performance contract, this would naturally also lead to energy savings and energy efficiency gains. So these are basically there's a bit of choice there for companies to either go for maybe an energy audit or an energy performance contract if you're using more than 10 terajoules a year. Also, data centers make their entry into this directive as they become more prominent and they're big energy users. The audits of data centers should become publicly available. Now, again, I can imagine that 100 terajoule or 10 terajoule, you don't exactly know how much that is. Well, to give you an idea, ABN AMRO Bank is a big bank in the Netherlands, but with presence in Northwestern Europe. If we only look at our activities in the Netherlands, we're one of the systemic banks in the Netherlands, then all of our activities only within the Dutch borders would total about 311 terajoules. So we definitely would need an EMS. RAI Amsterdam, which is a big conference center close by. If you're not from here, you probably don't know it, but it's a big conference center for international conferences, etc. They published that they use 139 terajoule of energy. And if you happen to have 37 restaurants with a floor space of 250 square meters each, then you would approximately be at a 10 terajoule level. So this is just to give you, I guess the perfect example doesn't exist in this case, but this is just to give you an idea of who would fall under which obligation. Short summary on energy efficiency. The gap towards 2030 on energy efficiency is 77 million tons of oil equivalent. And as mentioned, that's more than the energy use of the Netherlands in a year. If we simply do not use that energy anymore by 2030, we also don't have to make it sustainable. So it makes the whole puzzle a lot easier. The pace, we will have to speed up the pace of improvement year by year to 1.5% starting in 2023 towards 2030. Public organizations are the front runners. They have to renovate 3% of the floor space to near zero energy buildings. For example, public procurement is also a big part of that, and they reduce their emissions. They have to reduce their energy use by 1.7% per year. And finally, energy poverty is prominently addressed and has to be compensated. And as mentioned, I'll come back to that later when we discuss the Social Climate Fund. Let's see if there are any questions. Should we rely on technological developments or on changing our consumption behavior to improve energy efficiency? Well, both, but I think a lot of energy efficiency potential is already available. It was just never important enough. There is actually a lot of energy efficiency potential that is just sitting there idle with a positive NPV. So it means, you don't have, in only a few years, you earn your investment back. It's the cheapest way to achieve emission reduction. But if it doesn't have priority in an organization, then it will just be untouched. So through this regulation, I think a lot of organizations will actually be forced to look at this potential, and you'd be a bit silly maybe if you don't use this very cheap, abundant potential. Again, the first step. Obviously, we also need renewable energy and look at how we can achieve this target in other ways, all at the same time, but energy efficiency should not be overlooked. Is there a plan for governments to encourage and facilitate investment in green energy to drive this target up? While the ROI is higher for green energy than fossil fuels, a lot of investors are wary of it due to renewable energy still not being a mature energy industry. Not sure if I agree with that. Renewable energy actually breaks down in a lot of different technologies, and some are mature, others are not mature. Like wind has definitely matured. And as it becomes financeable, investable, actually ROIs are under pressure because and electricity prices are coming down. And other technologies, just to mention for you, green hydrogen, battery storage, a lot of technologies are still completely somewhere else. Earlier in the cycle, still need a lot of development. And as I mentioned earlier, really the combination of all these directives and regulation will definitely drive us in the right place. Is it likely that with only 40% renewable energy, that energy efficiency initiatives will be able to have a substantial contribution to close the gap, or is the industry forced to offset more? Again, it's a combination. It's it's a combination of all of these initiatives. So renewable energy, energy efficiency, and much more efficient use of fossil fuels. So maybe in some cases replacing one fossil fuel with a cleaner one, but hopefully immediately a step, if available, to a clean source, or maybe capturing emissions and storing them like big industries are planning with carbon capture and storage. It's not the ideal situation, maybe. It's an intermediate solution, but it's absolutely critical in order to attain climate targets in time. We can't just rely on ideal solutions. We really have to use all of the means available to pick up the pace, because that's the challenge that is at hand. Can you provide an example of nearly zero energy building? Is the technology ready and available for this building? Well, I can't walk you to a building right now, but the technology is definitely available. I think there is, this is not a technology question. So this is, I guess, more of an adoption question and a scalability question, maybe. But with the right will and the right policy instruments, there is no reason not to build nearly zero-emission buildings. Is sustainable procurement mandatory for the government in every EU country? Why not? No, if this is implemented, it is mandatory for every country. Will there be some sort of playbook support manual for public organizations to renovate in order to achieve the 3%, or is it fully up to the organizations to determine how? Well, always try to learn from each other. I would say there are a lot of gains have already been made. A lot of technology is also available. There must be examples right around the corner where organizations have done this successfully. So this is, again, energy efficiency is not in essence a brand new technology where we still have to do 10 years of R&D. But I assume that there are many handbooks and initiatives that can guide organizations along the way. For companies, how is terajoule calculated at country or EU level? No, at company level. At company level. As a banker, what's your best advice to the geothermal industry to make it more attractive to investors? Good question. There are, I guess, geothermal energy has a big potential and is already used a lot in agriculture, in greenhouses, for example. One of the big risks with geothermal wells is that sometimes you try to obviously you need a source of heat deep in the underground, and you do not have a guarantee that the heat will actually be as projected, that you're able to extract it and use it. So if you're boring and actually only half or the boring is a failure and there is no heat coming out or not sufficiently, so then the whole project may collapse. So you need some type of certainty mechanism or insurance for these execution risks, so to say. Once the well is working and operational, it could be a huge source of sustainable energy, but obviously you also need to match it with off-takers, because geothermal wells can produce a lot of renewable heat, but they produce it almost constantly. So you also need enough off-takers. You can't. You need thousands of houses and hopefully some industrial off-takers or maybe hospitals or other big users of energy. Otherwise, if there's no off-taker, so a lot of orchestrating and organizing there to get it done. A suggestion: an example of a zero-emission building is the Energy Academy in the Rug campus in Groningen, the university in Groningen. I like to mention that example because I actually did my study and PhD there. Good suggestion. How accurate, reliable is the data provided by companies and countries on both the energy consumption and CO2 emissions? Can you say something about the EU measurement and data control protocols? I can probably say more about this than would be good to fit in at this point. Let me just give an example. The maritime industry has been forced to at least ships above 5,000 gross tonnage have been under a measurement and verification duty for the past few years. It took a few years to get it going and to make sure that the data was reliable, that ship owners knew what to do, and to basically make sure that it all worked as intended. But there are a lot of mechanisms to make sure that this data is reliable. That's all I'm going to say about it for now.